come to save the day. Mighty Mouse is... no, that's the wrong song. Okay. Oh, no. Take this away from me, Alicia. Let me show my spiral zone head. Earth's most powerful soldiers. Earth's last chance to fight the zone. What was the thing? The spiral zone. Okay. Hi, how are you? Well, I'm a little bit intimidated here because 20 years after working on the series, I find that there is a website and I find that there is apparently a certain number of fans around. So, yes, I'd like to introduce myself as one of the supervisors. My name is Pierre and my co-supervisor was Georges Grama, with whom I had a great experience working on this series. And we had 65 episodes to do, and we had about less than a year, well, close to 11 months to do it. So it was pretty intensive work. And so cut this now. Cut it out. That's it. If it wasn't for you, Dick Courage, my brother would still be alive. Hi, I'm Pierre Desels. I was one of the supervisors on Spiral Zone. Nice to see you. I love this toy. Oh, gee. Yeah, well, I never thought that 20 years after working on this series that there would be actually a website created by Chris Millar. And I'd never imagined that there would be a following of fans or anyone interested in the series, because when we do this kind of work, we just basically work. It's done, it's finished, we forget about it. But to be honest, I'm very glad that I kept for 20 years a lot of original artwork. Boy, oh boy, that was quite an experience. What a piece that was to do. An incredible thing about it is that supervising on this thing, I got to be involved with so many aspects of BG designs, props, and a lot of work was involved in just correcting exposure sheets, actually retime things, correct storyboards for continuity, so that the continuity would be smoother. At the beginning, I was even involved in designing the way weapons would fire and things like that. So it's pretty amazing. The watercolors to explore the spiral zone itself, what it should look like, vehicles, you name it. I was involved in all kinds of aspects, which was so exciting. That's the one thing I loved about the series, because it was the closest to doing live action movies. And we were trying out, the more we tried to be fantasy and sci-fi orientated, the more we were brought back to reality because of the actual producers and the investors. So we could never go as far as we wanted to the sci-fi direction. But I mean, look at this. It's amazing. 20 years later, I still kept all that stuff. See, these are all variations on the possibilities of what the zone looked like. And I can't even remember what was approved, because I mean, it's just like spores and spuds and whatever designs of props that we have to do. A lot of times it would be approved by the producer and we were busy doing something else. This is something I treasure very much, because these are all corrections I made on storyboards. And what I was trying to do was to try to get dynamic compositions, which is very much more easy to do actually when you're working small. There's a famous illustrator who actually worked in that format. He always worked very small, just so that he would think about the composition, negative, positive space. And then he would project the pictures, the small tiny sketches on the canvas, and then from that sketch that he projected, he would actually start doing all the designs, details, and finish off his artwork. Oh, Mr. Overlord and Hirotaka, another victim of Overlord in the Spiral Zone. That's amazing. I mean, you don't see this anymore, but look at this here. Painted, inked cells. Inked on one side, and then painted on the other side. I mean, and the BGs often were animated. They worked sometimes, they didn't work so well, but nevertheless, I mean, this is something you won't see anymore. 20 years old is this material. So it's very important, all the work that went into the cells, because it could take hours and hours just to paint one cell, and these characters, if they had camouflage on their suits, they would actually take even longer to paint. That's quite a specimen. Next one. Yeah, what do we have? Well, of course, our hero, Dirk Courage. And here we have the actual background, the actual cells. So here's your background. And in the old days, when a layout was made, they would engrave from the layout towards the paper itself on which they would paint the background. So they would engrave with some kind of very pointy instrument in order to retrace all the lines where they should belong. Then after, color was added. And of course, well, you got the actual cells that go on top of it. In this case, we have 3 levels. We have the vehicle, we have Dirk Courage himself, and then we have this little device that is shooting out. So that's, you know, something that you will never see again, unfortunately, but this day and age now we use computers, so everything is done so fast. You just scan the layout into the computer, then it's colorized directly, and then the drawings are scanned as well, and then they just press a button, and then the color spreads, and that's it. So the job today of inking and painting is so much faster and easy than what we used to have to do. Here's an interesting one, which I like very much, because that's what Dirk Courage sees into his helmet. He sees through the building, 3-dimensional infrared type of image. So it was fun to experiment with this kind of visual stuff. I just wish we would have had more of a sci-fi look to it and have it a little bit more exaggerated, but anyways, it's okay as it stands right now, I guess. Ah, tu veux que je fasse autre chose? Bon, voyons. Ah, gee, this is interesting because these are variations on the actual generators. I really hated the generator we ended up with because those huge balls, they looked, you know, stupid. I mean, I thought it would be nicer to have something more creepy, a little bit more scary, you know, especially a generator that develops from a pod into this particular gigantic machine. So these were, you know, something that unfortunately never ended up in the pictures, but that's la vie, that's the way it goes. And here, this was interesting because these were research for the actual holographic zone. And I wanted to have something that was very, very different, so we ended up with something which looked very much like a negative image of the actual holographic zone. So that's quite nice. And of course, Hirotaka, when he's actually playing with the game, I tried to design different patterns so that they can actually use these patterns and put color into it and have them transform constantly. And as he's inside, he sees this point of view, which is the actual weapons and tanks attacking him. And then occasionally we would cut outside the holographic zone to reveal him in this bubble doing acrobatics into his room and actually making objects in his room fall down, chairs and all that kind of stuff. So this was a good episode, a real fun one to work on. But of course, like everything else, the preparation is intense, but often the animation is very sloppy and very disappointing. And for my personal opinion, I thought that the Korean studio, ACOM, did only 15 shows of the whole series, but I thought they actually were consistent. They did much better work. In Japan, we had a whole bunch of small studios, and sometimes the quality would be very high, and other times it would be the lowest caliber of quality possible. which was so disappointing. I would call retakes, and I knew the schedule didn't allow any corrections to be made on a lot of scenes, and it's very, very frustrating to work under conditions like that, especially a series of 65 shows in about 11 months, less than a year. Synchronization of the mouth. These are the lip sync model sheets. And of course, dealing with Japanese animators, Korean animators, what ends up happening is they don't read English, they don't understand English. So on the exposure sheet, what we usually do is we indicate the different mouth shapes that are going to be used. So if she's going to have the mouth closed, it's either because she's quiet, or she is going to say a word starting with the B sound, or the P sound, or the M sound. And basically, when we end with some of the last sounds, like O and U, well, the O, we can't exaggerate it like the actual cartoon because this is too realistic. But nevertheless, we try to get a shape that's close to O, and then the U is the smallest of all the mouths. A circle, but small. So this was a difficult thing to do because the character himself, Overlord, they had a tendency to move nothing, just the mouth, and it didn't work. So I had to design this series of mouth charts, drawings, so that they could actually move a little bit the structure, so it looked like it's flexible. Otherwise, it was so stiff. So there we have a lot of designs for the weapons. How does Razorback's Arpo on Grappler? So this was a series of drawings I was doing to keep busy, because at the beginning of the schedule we were just getting warmed up, and so basically I didn't want to waste time, so I wanted to do something that would be useful, that I could use when I get to Japan. So I was trying to devise all kinds of different methods and special effects for the actual weapons and how they work. And of course, well, some of it ended up on film and some were sort of changed to look worse. I wanted to keep busy because, you know, when I was doing this, there was nothing for me to really do, because I had to wait for storyboards to be approved. I had to wait for model sheets to be completed. And I just, you know, created myself as much work as I could just to get the thing rolling, right? So I don't spend my time doing nothing on my ass like the other jerk who got, you know, eventually demoted and eventually fired. Oh, this was interesting. For that episode, we had to find the Mona Lisa painting reproduction. And I was just lucky. I went into some art store and they had reproductions. And I was just so lucky. I found perfect reproduction of Mona Lisa, from which I was able to actually create this layout. Because as you see, our villain here decides that he's going to pull down the painting itself, destroy it. So anyways, these are nice souvenirs, because you live experiences that are sometimes very, very interesting when you're working on a project like that. This is some of the last episodes. As you can see, because of the time schedule we had, there was really problems. In some cases we couldn't wait for designs to come from America and be approved. So I ended up doing actual designs myself. But, you know, every time I would do stuff like that, I would think of the poor animator, because when you see a suit with all these, you know, designs of patterns on it, it scares the hell out of an animator, especially those who don't have the proper method of work. Because if you're animating a character like this, the last thing you want to think about is the actual designs and the details. You want to animate the whole shape, make it look good, and make sure that later, in a second and in a third step, you design what's missing. So anyways, this was pretty how would you say, demanding work. I mean, but I enjoyed every moment of it. Variations on Hirotaka, that's pretty amusing. A lot of that stuff I forgot. I mean, I really forgot what I was involved with. I look at that stuff now and it's like, wow, you know, nostalgia. And I can't even figure out now which one was approved, which one was, you know, used for the final series. you know, and I was involved with pods and all kinds of designs of vehicles, flying machines, and whatever, you name it. But I think the most enjoyable thing was to actually try to push the Spiral Zone series to have concepts that were a little bit more sci-fi. The only problem is we were always brought back down to earth, and that means the customer didn't want to go too sci-fi, didn't want too much exaggeration in the toys and whatever. So that was a little bit disappointing. But overall, though, I think that we did our best and we had some fun. But I think what I had the most fun doing was to actually go over each board, because every time we'd receive a storyboard for an episode, I'd have to do this in the apartment in Tokyo. That is to revise all the exposure sheets, then to revise all the storyboards to make sure continuity works, staging would work. And it was very, very, very difficult sometimes because I would end up having to actually give away 2 shows. And I remember one night I ended up drinking 2 bottles of red wine and actually a few beers without even, you know, noticing it, because I was so involved with those 2 particular shows. And they had to be ready for the next morning. So at 4 o'clock in the morning, I go to bed. Then the first thing you know, 8 o'clock, we have to be at the studio, explain to the Japanese supervisors what has to be done and why, and you know, explain all the action, explain the exposure sheets, and blah blah blah. Okay, that's enough. I just got zoned. I had a meeting with Overlord, so I'm gonna have to hurry up and say thank you very much for everyone for buying this DVD collection. I hope you enjoy it, and thank you especially for Chris Millar for giving such energy, interest, passion into the Spiral Zone. Goodbye. My meeting has to continue.